Hi there, I'm Skudgy. I'm a practicing witch and a professional tarot nerd, and I'm glad you're here. Our word this week is shuffle. Now, I'd wager we all know a definition for shuffle. That's to reorder a deck of cards. And we all do that before we do our readings, right? But what's really happening when we shuffle our tarot deck? Is it simply an action which randomizes the cards following a set of mathematical principles? Professor Percy Diaconis of Stanford University is in this cool video that I've linked below regarding the mathematics around shuffling a pack of cards. Now, although he's discussing a typical playing card deck of 52 cards, the formula can be applied to our tarot decks as well. And from this, I learned that the optimal number of riffle shuffles for a tarot deck is 9.42. 9.42 times. Remember that number, and you too can be a real tarot nerd, although I'm not sure why you'd want to. However, I still haven't figured out how to shuffle a deck 0.42 times. And if you've ever wondered how many different combinations there are of cards in a tarot deck, that's 1.132428 times 10 to the 115th power. That's how many combinations there are. That's more than the total possible number of chess games, and more than the estimated number of atoms in the observable universe. At least that's what the inner tubes tells me. If you're a professional math nerd and would like to share your thoughts, please comment. But let's think about that for a bit. There are billions and billions of possible combinations of a tarot deck. Does that mean that each spread we throw is special? Well, yes, but not because of the math. You see, if I pull one card from the deck, I have a 1 in 78 chance of getting a particular card. Now, that's an easier number to wrap our heads around, isn't it? The chance of any one of our spreads matching another spread exactly isn't impossible, but it is improbable. Now, I've been studying the cards for over 30 years, and I don't recall ever seeing two identical spreads laid out. Even if I did throw two identical spreads, that doesn't make them any more special than any other spread. Not really. What makes each spread special is that it is about the seeker. It's the seeker that's special, not the cards. All those big numbers about shuffling and numbers of card combinations are neat tarot nerd stuff. But at the end of the day, I don't think that they're really all that important. Do I think that there's some unseen universal force guiding the order of cards when I shuffle? I don't know. I do think, though, that what's really important is my connection to the seeker at that moment in time. It is through that connection to the seeker that my interpretations flow. In Holistic Tarot by Benebell Wynn, she says, shuffling the deck before reading is the opportunity for both the practitioner and the seeker to connect the conscious to the unconscious and form a bridge. That seems reasonable to me. And she discusses as well energetic reasons to shuffle as well. Shuffling before and immediately after a reading helps to dissipate any energies which might be hanging on to that deck. Before the reading kind of resets that deck for the new seeker, and after the reading, it sort of knocks off the energies from that reading so that it's ready for another time. When we are shuffling our cards, we are reordering physical thingies in a physical world that has math in it. But we should remember as well that we are also reordering our minds and our spirits in such a way that we can best use the tool. And the cards are, after all is said and done, simply a tool. We want to use that tool as best we can to help our seekers. This week's card is Temperance and was suggested by my longtime friend and colleague, Rune. Thanks, Rune. There are some cards in the tarot which seem to be more difficult for folks, generally speaking, than others. In my experience, Temperance is one of those cards. Maybe it'd help us if we take a look at the word temperance itself, because it's not really a commonly used word these days. The Latin origin of the word meant to moderate. From this, as time passes and as the word moves around, we get a bunch of related ideas. Ever know anybody with a bad temper? Or a good-tempered person? There was once a medical idea of the four humors, four fluids within our bodies which needed to be in balance for good health. The ideas of bad temper and good temper come from this. You ever watch any of those bacon shows and hear them talk about tempering chocolate? Here's a blacksmith tempering a piece of iron. That process helps to strengthen the metal. This is another concept associated with temperance, one of adjustment or transformation. We can see from all this that at its core, temperance carries the theme of moderation and adjustment. The use of the word for self-restraint or forbearance dates from the mid-14th century. The earliest known list of the major arcana is from the late 15th century. And it shouldn't be surprising that there might be some similarities between concepts and cards. This card often feels alchemic-y to me. Alchemical, alchemistry, feels like alchemy. And I've always been fascinated by alchemy, so there's that. Alchemy is a really big topic, but from what I know, the earliest alchemical processes were described as having 4 stages. The whole thing itself was a process of transformation, whether it be a literal transformation from lead into gold, or in a modern spiritual and psychological context of a transformation within ourselves. Occurring where it does in the order of the majors, it makes sense that some authors attribute temperance to the 3rd stage, citrinitas, the yellowing stage. This stage can be associated with the sun in a spiritual sense. We'll see this idea show up again a couple of times. In the Kabbalah of the Golden Dawn, temperance resides on the 25th path between Yesod, foundation, and Tiferet, beauty. Yesod is the 9th Sephirah associated with the moon, and Tiferet is the 6th Sephirah and is associated with the sun. Told you we'd see that sun again. The path of temperance lies fully on the middle pillar of the tree, the pillar of equilibrium and moderation. And although the moon and sun cards themselves have their own paths, you might find it interesting to study these 3 cards together. Temperance on the tree sees us moving upwards in a spiritual sense, becoming more fully integrated. At least that's how it seems to me. Your mileage may vary. Astrologically, a common correspondence for temperance is with Sagittarius. This is a Golden Dawn and Aleister Crowley thing, but honestly, it's always confused me. After all, the card shows us a figure doing things with water. I've always felt that's like an Aquarius thing, right? You know, the water bearer and all. But it seems the Golden Dawn wanted their correspondences to fall in zodiacal order. Well, some of them did, at any rate. In this table from the first volume of the Encyclopedia of Tarot by Kaplan and Huets, you can see various astrological correspondences for the major arcana. And at least 2 of the folks on this table were members of the Golden Dawn, Crowley and Starr, and they don't agree. I point this out to you to illustrate that there's no one right way to consider the tarot. I think the most important thing to do is when we settle on an idea, we ask ourselves, why? Let's take a shot at that with Sagittarius. See what I did there? Sagittarius is the archer of the zodiac. Sag is often portrayed as a centaur and is considered by some to be Chiron, a centaur from Greek myth. But as a non-astrologer type, Sagittarius is kind of confusing to me. I mean, we have this whole stab things at a distance part of the archer, and maybe this whole human horse thingy going on. It really seems like we're mixing a lot of our metaphors there. But Sagittarius is a mutable fire sign. It's the changiest part of a changey kind of element. And if we see temperance as a card of transformation, I think that fire fits right in. Well, what about the centaur thing, though? Well, if we consider that the centaur is a combination of an animal, a horse in this case, and a human, yes, I know, humans are animals too. Let's just ride this out, shall we? If this centaur is a combination of animal and human, the emotional and the rational, then it makes sense for a centaur to stand in as a symbol for balance. Now, if you wanted to, you could do that same kind of thing with the other signs as well. Just ask yourself why a bunch, just like a 4-year-old kid. Why? Temperance is numbered 14, and there's a couple of ways to look at that. Doing the math thing with it, 1 + 4 = 5, and that takes us to the Hierophant and the number 5. Compare Temperance with the Hierophant and the 5s in your deck and see where that takes you. Another way of looking at number in the majors is by dividing the major arcana into groups of 7, also called septenaries. The septenaries can be seen as the Fool's journey split into 3 parts, as the Fool moves through their own personal spiritual development. Temperance falls as the last card of the second septenary, where the Fool begins to move completely into the realm of spiritual enlightenment, whatever that means. And we shouldn't forget to consider where this card falls within the majors, between death and the devil. We'll get to take a look at this idea more in depth later this year. How's that for foreshadowing? Here's Temperance from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And there's a lot of stuff going on here. So much so that I'm not sure where to begin. Which makes me wonder, when we're reading cards, where do we start? We can always start with the book stuff, right? Sure, there's no reason not to. But I'm an intuitive reader, so all that book stuff comes in to help me make sense of what I'm seeing and feeling about the cards. The book stuff isn't my first stop. I usually start with what jumps out at me first. Sometimes one aspect of a card jumps out, sometimes another. Today, what's jumping out to me first is the triangle square thingy on the angel's robe. In the pictorial key to the tarot, Waite says, the square and triangle of the septenary. Okay, we've talked about that. But we haven't talked about Tattwas yet. Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up. Tattwas, which come to us from Indian philosophy, are graphical representations of the aspects of human experience. These ideas were incorporated into the philosophy of the Theosophical Society in 1877 and underwent significant expansion over the years. As early as 1898, the Golden Dawn incorporated Tattwas into their practices as a tool for the development of the mind, specifically the psychic or spiritual mind. I haven't found anything which directly links the triangle and the square on this card to Tattwas of the Golden Dawn, but it wouldn't surprise me in the least if there is a connection. In that system, the triangle and the square could easily be seen as a symbol for fire in that system, and after all, the upward pointing triangle is our traditional symbol for fire. Fire connects us to Sagittarius, and that little circle thing on the angel's brow, that's the astrological symbol for the sun. And there's more of that alchemy stuff that I told you about before. From here, I'm drawn to those cups. As a suit, cups is traditionally associated with water, and this is where I get that Aquarius vibe, even though that's an air sign, water bearer and all that. Waite says that it is held to be pouring the essences of life from chalice to chalice. Sounds transformative to me. Next, my eye is drawn to the glowing crown off in the distance with that path leading up to it. In the Kabbalah, the uppermost sephira is called Keter, the crown. And notice how that path is rather straight. That's sort of like that middle pillar on the tree. That path begins at the shore of a placid little pool, and the angel has one foot in the pool and the other on the shore. Waite says that this illustrates the nature of the essences the angel is pouring between the cups, the waters of spirit, and the lands of the material. Growing along the shore are a pool of lovely yellow irises. Waite doesn't mention them at all in the pictorial key, but it wouldn't surprise me in the least if they were included on the card by Pamela Coleman Smith, the artist of the deck. Maybe for the symbolism of the flower itself. And the iris flower is named after the Greek goddess of the rainbow, whom also acted in role of messenger. Iris even shows up in Shakespeare's The Tempest. Now, I'm not sure how all this might be relevant within the context of this card. I just think it's neat. Maybe this particular rabbit hole might lead you somewhere. And here we are with the angel about whom Waite comments, I speak of him in the masculine sense, but the figure is neither male nor female. The Pulp Tarot brings Waite's comment right up front, in a sense. Now, Waite may have meant the angel to be without gender, but here the angel is man and woman, which makes me think of an idea of balance, especially in a spiritual or psychological sense, such as Jung's concept of the anima and the animus. Cassandra Snow, in Queering the Tarot, states, while balance and inner peace are important for everyone, these lessons from Temperance hit a little bit harder for those of any marginalized identity. It's important to recognize how much harder finding harmony in your life and self may be when you're trapped in a situation where you have to be closeted, where you are unsafe, or if you are at a point where you're not even sure who you are or how you identify. In my King of Wands video, I talk a little bit about the use of gender in the tarot as a metaphor. In Temperance, however, we can go a little bit beyond that metaphor. In speaking about balance and transformation, Temperance can encourage us to take a look inside to more fully understand our own equilibrium. I believe that each human soul, whatever that is, exists on a continuum of identity. Recognizing that and working to fully integrate our own spiritual balance can go a long way toward helping us feel more like, well, ourselves. I think this card from the Urban Tarot may be the most beautiful tarot art I have ever seen. The card is named Art in the tradition of Crowley's Thoth deck. When I think about art, the first thing that pops into my head are paintings. But art itself as a concept is more than paintings and sculpture, music, or literature. In one of his journals, W.B. Yeats, poet and occultist, said, supreme art is a traditional statement of certain heroic and religious truths passed from age to age, modified by individual genius but never abandoned. The revolt of individualism came because the tradition had become degraded, or rather because a spurious copy had been accepted in its stead. I'll let you ruminate on that one for yourselves. Art is transformative. It creates a change within the artist and within the receiver. Art is born of the tension of opposites, that tension that lies in the middle, and the art is produced in the release, the reconciliation, and the equilibrium. The opposites expressed in this card are subtle. The red and white paints symbolize fire and water. Robin Scott, the artist of the Urban Tarot, states in the guidebook, with the Thoth deck, Crowley saw that one could mix and combine opposing elements, water and fire, red and white, and rather than diminishing both or canceling out their energy, it was possible to create from them something wholly new, with power unique to its elemental parts. The Thoth deck calls this trump art, and so do I. It speaks about taking opposing pieces and finding a way to harmonize them, mix them, combine them into a new and unique whole. Solve et coagula, as the old alchemists say, dissolve and combine. Here in the Wildwood Tarot, Temperance is named Balance. It's rather straightforward, right? The horned serpent appears in legends from all over the world and is often associated with change, transformation, and rebirth, as are snakes as well. The caduceus, or staff of Hermes, is also a symbol of transformation And our Ophidian friends here hint at that as well. The guidebook described the serpents as red and white, carrying the tough symbolism of fire and water. But honestly, the white one here looks kind of blue to me. But that still works for water, right? The birch tree, around which the serpents twine, is also a symbol of rebirth. And what's with the weird face in the rock there? I see that here as the mask of personality each of us wears on the face of our soul. And from that grows the birch, which is climbed by transformative energies, climbing upwards towards a transformed and balanced spiritual whole. Temperance is one of those cards some folks struggle with, and I get it. It represents ideas and concepts which aren't too prevalent these days: moderation, balance, transformation, art. I've heard things like go big or go home, conspicuous consumerism. The grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. I was once dumped by a girlfriend because I wasn't ambitious. Art is underfunded in our schools and underappreciated by society in general. Temperance is a card that speaks to finding a balance within and of spiritual rebirth through that transformation of, well, us. And you know what? I think striving to be a better human for myself, my loved ones, and the world at large, I think that's quite ambitious. And it's hard, too. Personal transformation isn't easy, and it often isn't fun. But the alchemy of the self is worth it. This week's card was suggested by Rune. Thanks, Rune. Enjoyed doing this one. Thanks for spending some time with me today. And if you've enjoyed your time, please like, subscribe, share, comment. My name's Skaji. Safe journey.